Hello, bitches. Welcome. No one will ever accuse me of having too symmetrical of makeup. Not even neighbors. Like, as the saying goes, it's like, sisters, not twins. Mine aren't related. They aren't even neighbors. They're like colleagues. Anyway, hello. Welcome. Hello, Mr. Good Time. Welcome. What is this? Whatever this is. Channel? The stream is whatever this is. You're here just in time for my intro. An attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. I'm Aubri. Welcome. Glad to have you. It's another day, another stream in fascist America, the United States of America. Welcome to the people who are interested in creating a better world, who want to build systems outside of these oppressive ones, where we see the humanity in one another. We talk about real history, not colonized history. And this means that we are not doormats. We call out bullshit. We have robust discussion, good faith criticism, even. Namaste to you, if this is what you are here for and what you are interested in. For the people who are here to exacerbate these hierarchies of human dignity and come here with ill intent, a curse be upon you. I've recently added this blessing and curse, especially with certain bad actors that can and have come in the stream before. So my take is people who are doing good things should be blessed more, and fascists need to be scared more. So there we go. Hello, Bunso, Starbard, welcome. Glad to have you. How are you doing? How are you doing, Mr. Good Time, as well? Welcome to you. Apparently my body count is around 40, give or take one. Wow. My body count is, because of growing up Mormon, is one person, my partner. So very virginal vibes over here, but not in spirit, at least. Stuart Little, that's my partner. Yeah, I'm all for people embracing sexuality. Ex-Catholics are freakier than Mormons. That is true. I'm a slut in spirit. Also, there are shirts that are sold in Salt Lake, because Salt Lake City, SLC, there are shirts that say SLUT for like Utah. And I love that. I love that for us. 1%. I know. Okay. Revealing some stuff about myself. I guess that's something you didn't need to know. Or, I guess, who cares? Anyway, welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about current colonization and imperialism and witch hunts, which happen to fall in very neatly to what we are talking about in Macbeth, what we are reading. Da, 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 da. That's something we do over here. We make connections with the patterns in history and how this is very important in understanding what we are currently experiencing, that current events don't just happen out of nowhere, that they are tied to history. So those emotes, Mr. Good Time. Yeah, go get some food. Do what you need to do. To everyone here, your conversation, discussion is very welcome. Insertion of opinions, well-informed opinions in particular. Robust discussion, like I said, but also if you are just wanting to relax and lurk, that's also welcome. Okay, so I wanted to cover some current events, some things that we didn't get to yesterday as a continuation of what has been happening in the world with headlines. And in particular, there was something that I saw came out today, this video, a new McCarthyism? Yes. Yes, that's what is happening. Republicans are, and Democrats as well. People in the establishment are very afraid of the changing tide in rising populist sentiment, anti-establishment sentiment against these systems that we are existing in. And so there's a lot of fear mongering. We need to call out that bullshit. And this McCarthyism, witch hunts that were happening, the Red Scare, also can be tied directly to historical witch hunts that we will be talking about for the history and context of Macbeth. So this is me planning out the streams. I'm like, how about we make these connections? This sounds interesting. So that's how my brain works. Don't worry, I'm still apostolic, and I've been with the same person since middle school. Wow. Yeah, for me it's like to each their own. People should be able to do what they want. If it's in a consensual way, who cares? Have fun. All right. Shall we get into our humorous video for today? I was going to show more pop culture moments, but I think I'm going to do that tomorrow, just because I got started a little bit later than what I originally had planned. Surprise, surprise. This is one of my greatest weaknesses. I will own up to this, is having a poor concept of how long things take. That's something I am currently and continually working on. Okay. I saw this. This was recommended to me by The Onion. Mother shares how video games radicalized her son to run around and pick up coins. Kind of dumb, but also kind of funny. So here we go. Shall we? Also, how are things with you, Mr. Goodtime? Checking in with you.
As the mother of a 10-year-old boy, I know firsthand just how dangerous video games can be. Not only are they addictive and isolating, but they can teach our children to mimic toxic and sometimes deadly behaviors. And my Michael was no exception. Video games radicalized my son to run around and pick up coins. And now, his life is ruined.
Damn. You can see the background, the music.
At first, Michael would pick up a nickel here or there and yell, woohoo! But then things started to get more extreme. He'd become so desensitized that he would sprint down the street pointing at the coins, jumping on the coin.
Deadpan woohoo, yelling woohoo. That really got me. I enjoyed that.
And spinning around in a circle when he held the coins. That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. I tried everything to stop it. Taking away his coin purse, hitting him over the head to scatter his coins. I even tried crushing him with a barrel to steal his coins. But every time, he just went out and did it again.
Damn.
Then One
Hitting him
afternoon,
over the head. Crazy.
I get the call that I've been dreading my entire life.
You
It was
robbed
the
a bank.
police. They said they had my son, that he had entered a grocery store and had done the unthinkable. Michael had gotten his head stuck in a coin star machine. But what had I done? What kind of boy had I raised? When they took him to the station, all he could say was game over.
Hello, Bounce House. Welcome. How are you doing? Good day to you. We're watching a video by The Onion that is called Mother Shares How Video Games Radicalized Her Son to Run Around and Pick Up Coins. Game over, man. It's game over. Game over in what way? If you are interested in relating. This. All he could say was game. Duh. Okay. See, you're on top of things more than I am. Yeah, all I could say was game over. Damn. And really, isn't it game over for all of us? Isn't this how we all feel? Thank you. I used a felt eyeliner, and this is much better than just using eyeshadow. That is a crime to many people who wear makeup consistently, is to use eyeshadow for everything. But also, some of us are not made of money, bitch. So I happen to get this. But of course, this is how I feel with most of these felt tip eyeliners. They either bleed everywhere, or they dry up and have two good drops in them. So I used it for this, and I feel like it was worth it for me. But no one will ever accuse me of having too symmetrical of makeup. A game over type of vid. But it's not very wrong. This vid is a great creator. Ooh, okay. All of my makeup is currently expired. Yep, that's how it is for me. But I'm not throwing it out, but also not using it in my eyes anymore. That's probably wise. I will still use expired primer. I don't know what that's doing to my skin. Probably not great things, but but isn't it just game over for all of us? Isn't that how we all feel? That we're well, it's game over for this makeup and for us in society. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Okay, we'll play that after this.
Whoa.
How was the stream with Zach?
I will always love my son,
How are you doing?
but I barely recognize him anymore. And if I could, I would ban video games forever to protect kids like Michael from ever having to see a coin in the first place.
Not a queen, a coin. She's part of the crowd that's no, we don't need any sort of cash. These videos are not even really out of the realm of possibility. This is where The Onion can get the reputation of being more of a news outlet. The news outlets where it's this isn't even satire anymore, sadly. You barely caught any of his stream. You're doing all right? Glad to hear it. Since I've moved in the new apartment, I've caught a lot less of his stream, sadly, because I don't have as much desk space to have device playing his stream. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a bummer. Bella. Oh, hello, Bella. I say hi. Give Bella pets for me. Also, this goes to anyone. If anyone is interested in joining the Discord, pet photos are highly encouraged. I do have a form for the Discord to fill out. This is to weed out those with ill intent. Ooh. The complete and total death of culture. Damn. This really is game over. A lot of discords, but I'd be willing to join yours. Yeah. I mean, I will be the first to admit I'm not always, it's not like the busiest type of Discord. And that is more of my speed, like quite literally, because I'm not what most would call technologically savvy or used to the speed with which notifications happen. I think communication happens at a much faster speed than my brain is able to keep up with. I realize this makes me sound like a boomer, and I don't care. As long as I am not a boomer in politics, in pulling up the ladder, that's what I care about. You like slower discords? Okay. Then that that sounds like more of a place for you. Also, if you are interested in joining, just include your username in the form on the like how you heard about, just so I know I can connect the dots. I have to mute like 90% of Discord notifs. That's how I feel. That's also with like signal chats that I'm with. I have to like mute everything. I get so overwhelmed. It's like between like texts and like social media and like the social media platforms and Discord and Signal that I'm like, I don't think our human brains were meant to be operating at this speed. And then everyone wonders why we all have ADHD. You know what I mean? Um, that probably makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I think it's like a way for our brains to adapt to like the high volume of things. Ooh, this really does look interesting, this video. Also, I think we're gonna watch this on Culture Corner, Vince Staples' Tiny Desk concert. I mean, he has a great body of work, but especially this last album I really enjoyed.
The world was painted with a different color palette. Television, reflecting society's ideals, showcased families bound
Our
by
culture's
traditional
rotting from
values,
the
with scenes
inside
of
out
caretaker
for
mothers,
reasons beyond anyone's
mischievous yet
control.
kind-hearted children, and diligent
Max Murphy is an existential imbecile. I like that. I like him already. Yeah, I think it's like, for me, what is being told to us, served to us as culture, rather than like what are the people deciding what culture is. Because there still is like plenty of vibrant culture to be had in the world, but it certainly is not coming from the fascist billionaire ruling class where they are like, oh, it's all about like whiteness and sameness. That's like, okay, that's not, we can't rely on taste from these people. Um, if this is all right with you, I think I will save this for Culture Corner on Friday, since this is incredibly relevant to Culture Corner. I want to give it the time it deserves as well. Okay, cool. Thank you for the recommendation. Besides the limited space, how for desk space, how is it in your new apartment? I hope the move was okay. Moving is very stressful. How did the cats do with the move? Bella and Alice. Okay, as we are talking about today, imperialism, colonization, and witch hunts, I think it is important to connect the dots between the illegal, immoral war that is being embarked upon, pursued violently, uh, violently executed by the US and Israel, as well as many Western nations that they are complicit. Um, we need to be talking about how these tactics are not new. That's something that we do over here, as well as like many other creators talk about, streamers. People much smarter than I often talk about this. But it is important to be highlighting how these tactics have not just come out of nowhere. I think there are many people, especially liberals or white leftists in particular, who do not want to confront the fact that this type of colonization and imperialism is not just happening with Trump. It's not just happening with Netanyahu. That these events are products of a long history of colonization and non consensual domination of nations. So, also, we are having an ad break. I guess I should have announced that before it started because the people who would want to know are currently seeing an ad. It's been great. They did fantastic. Oh, good. Do you have any like prep that you do for them? Inquiring minds want to know. I'm still having most of my stress of the move related to my old roommates who made getting my last shit back difficult. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that would be stressful. I hope you can get your stuff back. It's like as if like life isn't hard enough as it is. Like we don't need people who should be helping or like on our side to be making things harder, you know? Okay. This is from yesterday. Shall we hear what Amy Goodman has to say? I've said this before and I'll say it again. Amy Goodman is providing us with great independent media, but also sometimes seeing her and hearing her can like make me stressed. Where I'm like, uh-oh, we better buckle up for some bad news. But you know, at least we're getting real news that is highlighting the interconnected global situation of us all. Not really much prep. I had them in a closed room when the movers were there, getting the furniture as set up as possible, then got more items to have the space a little more ready. Oh, that's good. That's good, so that you're able to, like, limit their stress as much as possible. Yeah, even, I don't know how your cats are in the car. Our cats are, they let us know that they're very upset. So I think we need to do more like trial runs. But also, on the Patreon, I'm going to be releasing a video for bonus content of Juniper walking on a leash. I've been doing that more with her. Kit hates it, but Juniper, our little gray cat, is enjoying it. So I'll be posting that there. All right. They were surprisingly not very upset. That's great. They're more upset when I'm away briefly, but my friends had a good time watching the cats. Oh, I'm glad that they were in good hands, too. That's amazing. You must take very good care of them as well.
This is...
All right. Oh, what? Let's get into this. But, we're going to be hearing from Jim McGovern on the bullshit that's going on.
This is Democracy.
I'm refreshing it because if I've had videos up for more than a day, it will be like, content not found when I try playing it after a few seconds. So getting ahead of that.
Now, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The U.S. has paused bombing Iran for a third straight night after senior Trump officials reportedly warned the president about dwindling munition stockpiles. In response, Iran said it would pause retaliatory strikes against U.S. bases across the Middle East. Last week, the entire Democratic House caucus and 4 Republicans voted to pass a resolution calling on Trump to withdraw U.S. forces from hostilities against Iran. We're joined now by one of those Democrats, Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts.
Aww.
He's been a vocal critic of Trump's foreign policy, from the war in Iran to the administration's targeting of Cuba.
I love you very much.
He served in Congress since 1997, is the ranking member of the House Rules Committee. You have described, Congress member, and welcome to Democracy Now!, Iran as Iraq 2.0. Explain.
Well, it's just like Iraq. We're getting involved in a quagmire here, an endless war. A war based on arrogance and bad intelligence. And the bottom line is this war in Iran is not only risky, it's illegal, and it's costly. Tens of billions of dollars going into this war in which there is no way for us to succeed or accomplish any of the goals that Donald Trump said he wanted to accomplish. But I'm really particularly frustrated because the House of Representatives and Congress in general has ceded its power and its authority to the executive branch. We should be voting on whether to authorize a war in Iran. I don't think a majority in the House or Senate would vote to do that, but we should be voting on these things. We shouldn't just give that power to the president and the Speaker of the House. Is to blame here. Look, we just reported that Trump has kind of put a pause on bombing. Let's hope that remains. But with him, you never know. I mean, in a week or two, he could launch an intensified attack. And if that is the case, the Speaker of the House ought to call Congress back into a special session, because we're in recess now, and we ought to debate it. There ought to be oversight, and we ought to vote on it. The Speaker should stand up to the president and stand for the powers of the legislative branch and stop being a coward.
So what would it mean if a war powers resolution was passed by the House and the Senate? What exactly would that force President Trump to do? Well,
if we were in sync, it would ultimately end funding for the war. I mean, that is how you end wars. We have to stop the funding because this president will do whatever the hell he wants to do, and he doesn't care about the law. So, right now these votes are largely symbolic, but I think it shows, that where the majority of Congress stands on this stuff. Congress stands with the American people. Only 28% of the American people think this war is worth it. Everybody else is against it. I mean, and people are horrified by the fact that the United States of America, we're dropping bombs on elementary schools in Iran when they'd rather have that money spent on building elementary schools here in the United States. I mean, we're committing human rights crimes in the conduct of this war as well.
So talk about last week, we saw Hegseth.
Yeah, this is imperialism of not caring about what is quote unquote legal, especially with just pursuing this war and not having any restraints on it, which goes to show like how disempowered we really are in most of our nation states, in the US especially, of how most people are against what is going on, and yet they continue. Like, as Amy is bringing up, Pete Hegseth had a hearing last week, I don't remember. And he got some hard questions that he wasn't able to answer. Was he grilled enough? No, clearly not. People who are part of the establishment rarely push hard enough, which is why they are in that position of power to begin with most of the time. And we see how even though he did get pushback and he wasn't able to answer questions, per usual with all of these fascist idiots, these with colonizer tactics, it's all about a continued colonization of the world to justify imperialism, that nothing has happened. So I think the lack of accountability, how we are seeing very little movement when there is cratering public support, should really be a wake-up call to most people, particularly in the US, of what we define as democracy. Is it an illusion of us having free will, of actually feeling like we're choosing something, when we are just having a shuffling around of some of the same actors, even if they're different people? They represent a lot of the same things. So it's like, it will be interesting to see what midterms bring. Electoral politics do affect our material conditions, but especially with them setting up this all of this distrust in elections and regularly and openly floating the idea of having ICE and cops at polling stations, that like we should be concerned, and they're already setting the stage for distrusting elections and such. So we need to be focusing, in my mind, on outside pressure. And this comes with community organizing, labor organizing, being involved in direct action, and actually providing the resources and help that we all need in our local communities, that will help us to survive what comes our way. I don't claim to have all the answers. So there's also that. But there's my take, I guess. I'm going to get a drink real quick, but I'll keep this playing. I'll be right back.
Go before the Senate and talk about why the Pentagon needs tens of billions of dollars more in dealing with Iran, and how could the Democrats desert the soldiers. Very interesting, by the way, about the count on soldiers dead because of outcry. I mean, the last 4 soldiers, they were taken off the list of the dead because they died after President Trump declared ceasefire. They've been added back, as well as apparently something like 140 soldiers who've been hurt, adding to something like well over 600 injured and 18 killed. That's U.S. Iran, we don't know the numbers.
Yeah, the lack of candor is concerning in and of itself. But the fact that the Secretary of Defense goes before the Senate and says, give me tens of billions of dollars more for this war, when they still have tens of billions of dollars in unspent money, tells you that they're thinking of a war that's going to go on for quite some time. Look, I mean, our defense bill budget now is going to be like $1.6 trillion when all is put together. I mean, that's like...
I've been working with a community campaign for the last few years. It's so necessary work, and it needs so many people to be involved. Yeah. Yep. Good for you. Proud of you for doing that. Yeah, and it's like people being involved locally and with organizing, this can look so different because it is so diverse as to like what that even means. So like not trying to prescribe like one particular solution or of what that looks like, but especially as people like choose what resonates with them. Yeah, it also is like not only like tangible help, it is a really great way of engaging in like, you know, care of other human beings, but also self-care. To be like, oh, we're very disempowered in many ways. We need some sort of release valve for all of the bullshit that's going on that is hopefully addressing people's needs. And then we don't have to carry it inside all the time. There are a lot of offline tasks to do. There are plenty of ways to get involved. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to share, if you're willing, some ways that you do so, I'm sure that would be wonderful to have for all of us.
Unbelievable. I mean, I think Dr. Strangelove would be impressed with that number. And you know, I'm a big critic of this administration, but even by their standards, listening to the Secretary of Defense speak before the Senate, I mean, he sounded like a lunatic. It sounded like there needed to be an intervention. He didn't answer the questions. And, you know, the questions that most people had is, you know, what is the strategy? What is the clearly defined mission? What is the goal? How do we get out of this? You know, when does this end? He had no idea. And he tried to make it a referendum on whether you support the troops or not. Supporting the troops means not putting them in harm's way to begin with. I mean, it's irresponsible for us to be deploying troops in a situation like this when the President and the Secretary of Defense don't have a plan at all.
So the question is, where do U.S. taxpayers, where their money goes? You are co-chair of the Hunger Caucus in the House of Representatives. If you can talk about the level of hunger in the United States with the Trump administration cutting food assistance, driving up child hunger.
Well, hunger is getting worse in this country. Over 50 million, over 50 million Americans are hungry or food insecure in the United States of America, the richest country in the history of the world. It's unconscionable, and as a member of Congress, I'm ashamed of that fact. Trump and the Republicans passed this big ugly bill a little bit a year ago that went on to put new restrictions in place for SNAP recipients, more work requirements, and is a $200 billion cut to the program that's going to hit at the end of next year. Already, because of the paperwork and the work requirements, millions and millions of more people are without the benefit. Millions of children in this country have lost their food benefit. And it just seems to me that there's something fundamentally wrong when we have money for bombs, but we don't have money to make sure people in this country get fed. And every dollar we invest in food and nutrition actually, saves us money in a whole bunch of other areas. Kids learn better if they're not hungry when they go to school. People are less likely to get chronic diseases if they have access to good nutrition and food. But to cut this benefit, by the way, the worst of it's going to hit next year. That in this country that we're tolerating that level of hunger is astounding to me.
I also want to ask you about.
Find a community-led campaign that you're strongly invested in and strongly committed to win, and see if people running it can use the type of help you can provide. I love that. Also that a disclaimer of like seeing what it's all about and what your skill set is, what people need. The campaign I work on only has single staff member and they're only part-time towards our campaign. Make sure that you can see yourself working with these people, but also make sure you have a way to be mindful about not burning yourself out. That's really wise. I think it also is good, like what you were saying, to see where you will align, because there are times where like you may, like on its face, feel like, oh yeah, there's a lot of common ground here, but especially if there are like, if things are being done in a way that's very hierarchical, and it is not necessarily based around, like, it presents as one thing, but it's not necessarily a thing in practice, like being aware that that can be an issue and then directing that energy towards other causes that you align more with, that like that it can make you feel guilty in like retracting some of that energy, but also like that energy is better spent to causes that you feel like you're valued more, and also that you have more alignment with tactics and ideology. There are personal tasks. There are phone banking tasks, there are IT tasks, there are talking to people tasks, transportation tasks, research tasks, marketing tasks. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's like we all have our own unique particular skill set. And I think there are many people that think like, oh, if I am involved, it means I have to like have a degree in like organizing or something like that. And that's not necessary. It's like coming with the experience that you have is very important. And often, like, if you can speak personally to a specific issue, like that, having lived experience is very important to informing causes. So like it can be intimidating getting involved at times, but especially if you feel like it is localized and you can feel some of the impact yourself, that can be a really great way to get started. Get ready for a fight. You won't be alone. Yep. Yeah, of like it's community building, but also it's work, you know? Thank you, Bounce House. That's amazing. Yeah, whether it like whatever the type of campaign is, or like mutual aid network, um yeah, a direct action group, it's like making sure that you feel seen there, but also understanding that like it's all about the collective. And if you see some red flags in like behavior, it's good to take note of that And then also, if there are green flags of like people actually gathering around a particular issue and stuff that they're passionate about, it's like if you aren't used to seeing green flags, that can feel threatening. At times you're like, uh-oh, people are caring, what does this mean, you know? So feel free to just call me Bounce or Bouncy. Okay, cool. Yeah, and if people are wanting to even learn more about like starting things as well, like there are already so many things happening locally to join. This is something that Bunso Starbard shared the other day, is this beautiful Trouble resource of trainings and information and education for people to learn about various tactics. So there is also that. You have a few more you can plug? Yeah, for sure. You're reading that book? Ooh, yeah. What do you think? How is it? But good connections can have, it's so easy to doubt yourself or others in sincerity. Yeah, I think that is a really great point of like if like I think most of the time we're taught in life that if something feels too good to be true, then it is, of just, you know, like paying attention, going with open eyes into situations, but also like if you are meeting people with like good hearts that are wanting to create change and they act in that manner, like you see the evidence of that, that like it can be very radicalizing to be like, wow, people like this exist, you know? Beautiful Trouble book is like $60. Okay. It's really good. Brings me back to my indoctrination in irregular warfare. It's good to rehash the fundamentals. The Midwest Academy strategy chart. Ooh, I haven't heard of that. Oh, okay. I see that this is, yeah, by some health organizations. Here's this strategy chart. Fillable. Oh, it's a download. Whoops. Also, mutual aid for striking workers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if there is, like, if it means your type of organizing is getting involved in a union in your workplace, in your complex, like a tenant union, um, if there is a local center to be volunteering at, I'm going to pull up one. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so you can find ways, like different templates online for this strategy chart. Goals, organizational considerations, constituency, people power, decision maker, tactics, and tasks. Yeah, of just like this really goes to show like the practical steps that are necessary for organizing. Training for change. Very cool. training organization for social justice and left movement builders. We believe strong training and group facilitation skills are vital to power building. Since 1992, we've cultivated and shared people-centered pedagogy for trainers, organizers, and strategic facilitators rooted in experimental methods, emotional intelligence, and commitment to deep capacity training. We train across issues and sectors from large international unions to local immigrant defense community groups, from peer training organizations to base building groups. That's awesome. Unions used to provide mutual aid. Most often I'm thinking of striking workers that are not yet part of a union. Yeah, so there can be strike funds that people can donate to. Yeah, and there are some, like that's what, people should be focused on, but like, yeah, let's see. So, for example, like in Utah, where I'm located, the Utah Workers Center, this is a place that is a hub for workers to get organized and learn about how to unionize a workplace. I think that it can also provide referrals for helping people get unionized with tenant unions as well, but yeah, they have resources like a meeting space, printing that is available, especially when it comes to having a separate space from a workplace to actually talk about the bullshit that's going on. This is very important, especially like to be able to book rooms, that often, libraries can be good for this, but if people are not able to get library cards, it's like having places like this are really really great. At least in my blue state, most unions don't really strike unless they're just getting set up. Yeah, in Utah, where I'm located, it's really difficult for people to create unions and even get to a place where striking is possible. Because they're, especially of late, with so many laws that have come out that are union busting, of gutting the collective bargaining power of workers, public workers especially. So there's a lot of fear mongering. I mean, I know this can also happen in blue states, but yeah, often it is a tactic that is used because people don't have many other options, where it's even difficult to get a union started to begin with. But yeah, it's pretty bleak, but it doesn't mean that it's not worth pursuing. So it's like there are a number of things that people can be doing, especially it's like mutual aid can also be like, we need to reframe mutual aid in my mind to not just be like a network that is like created by someone else, like we're calling ourselves a mutual aid fund. Like mutual aid can also be created by like a group of friends, of like if you have a group of people where you're doing like a potluck once a week to help with meals, that's a form of mutual aid. Or like people trading off like with driving, or like asking people for rides to places if someone has access to a car. If there is like a way to like combine groceries where you like share some groceries together, like having some like local resources or just resources that you're stocking up on, that is a form of mutual aid too. Silence is a good tactic. If you shout down your opposition, they could use that as an opportunity to say they were a target of, anti-freedom speech. In the book, it talks about how Code Pink protesters stormed Nancy Pelosi's town hall meeting after the Q&A section so they could stand in front of her without saying a word. Yeah, it's like, I love the creativity, too. There are so many ways to resist and protest, and this is where like each of us coming in with our own unique perspectives and creativity and experience is so important, of actually valuing each other's diversity of thought. That it's like that can also be a sign of, if you feel like there are people who are trying to say like there is one particular right way to do something and it wasn't necessarily like voted on by people. It's like, hopefully whatever group you're joining in is more democratic, of people wanting to actually have a say in what is going on. I mean, there can be a difference in like some militant examples of like, okay, we chose this leader because we trust this leader to make decisions in this way. But like, just, you know, trying to be aware of how people are making decisions as well. It's like, ideally it is a democratic process, but like, we can acknowledge that no movement is immune to being co-opted by bad actors or infiltrated, or people who are wanting to just like have the name recognition or something. But I think it's pretty, you can tell pretty quickly by like the results that people are getting, especially how people are being treated in a particular space, of just like going in with that understanding as well. Thank you all for all of these insights and resources. I love this. This is what I love about streaming. We also share a lot of these in the Discord too. Especially as like the world is falling apart around us, that it is helpful to focus on what we can do in moving the needle. And often the more localized our efforts are, the more impact we will have.
Divide in the Democratic Party. Former Congress member Rahm Emanuel, who served as President Obama's chief of staff, was mayor of Chicago, published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last week, headlined, "The Bernie Bros Could Spoil Democrats' Midterms." He criticizes the role of DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. He wrote, "The DSA and others are saddling the Democratic Party with nominees whose wildly unpopular positions will protect Republicans from having to pay the price of Donald Trump's corruption and economic incompetence." Bernie Sanders responded on Face the Nation.
You have an establishment like Rahm Emanuel, who are dependent on billionaire campaign contributors and want to maintain the status quo. Then you have a progressive movement, which, by the way, what is getting these guys nervous is we are winning all over this country. It's suddenly Mamdani in New York City, it's in New Jersey, it's in Ohio, it's in Colorado. People are sick and tired of the Rahm Emanuels and the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment. The American people are tired of a rigged economy, a corrupt campaign, finance system.
We gotta be more centrist. I know. We have to pivot to the middle. We have to pivot to the middle. Of like, no, this is just because you want to stay in power and you feel your power being threatened. But yeah, and these all go back to like these like, oh, but who is going to be electable? Like these electability types of arguments. But why we are seeing, it's like, it's not an accident that like the establishment, people in the establishment, politicians have not really presented that united or effective of a front against fascism, because they are the other side of this fascist coin. And it really goes to show that it's like, this system is built off of colonization and stolen land and genocide, and that the system that was built was meant to be functioning as it is functioning now, to have these class disparities, to make it so that there is an elite group, elite, quote unquote, that is part of the ruling class making decisions where there are very little checks on their power, and the rest of us are generating wealth for them. So like, again, why it's important to be involved in ways where we feel like we are actually like contributing something and getting something back if we need as well. That it should be a reciprocal relationship. And yeah, it just is wild how there are still some people that are like, no, I think I think we need to be more moderate. I mean, I think most people who even claim to be on the left understand how ineffective all of these like tactics have been, supposed tactics, and why they're so upset with the democratic establishment, and why it should once again make us question what even is democracy in this place that we find ourselves. Who will lead us? Ourselves. Yeah, both wings make the same. Yep, exactly. It's not red versus blue, it's state versus you. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And the establishment maintaining the status quo.
Can you respond, Congressmember McGovern?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should be arguing amongst ourselves about the decisions that voters are making. I mean, we need to respect the voters. Part of the reason why, you know, you see some of these candidates getting elected who the establishment doesn't really like very much is because people are frustrated that we're not fighting hard enough, that we're not standing up for bold solutions. People don't want to.
Yeah, because of the same issues existing, like what you were saying, Boone, so across party lines of corruption, of corporate greed and interference, and how for people to even run for office to begin with, they most likely need to be part of the petty bourgeois and have a certain amount of wealth and stability in their lives in order to have the luxury and free time and funds in order to run for office. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation, want rain without thunder and lightning. This is a great Frederick Douglass quote. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one. It may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never did and never will. Fierce. Thank you for sharing. That's a great one to share. Yeah, and it's not without sacrifice and risk. Petty bourgeois. Oh, thanks for bringing that up. It's more of like specifically like a Marxist term to talk about how yeah, gotta love Frederick Douglass, exactly. It's talking about a certain class of people who maybe are not part of what is called the bourgeois, which is essentially the ruling class, like the politicians, the oligarchs, people who are making decisions, who control most things. It's like the billionaires, the people with generational wealth. Yeah, thank you for calling that out, though, because I want to be able to use language that's accessible to people. But it's essentially saying people who can come from the working class at times, but they have some upward mobility or a sense of or some generational wealth where they are able to actually get into the halls of power. Small business owners who don't have to abide by labor laws for companies because they have under 50 employees. Baby tyrants. Yeah, that's... Thank you, Bounce House. I can also pull up... I do have a copy of like the Communist Manifesto on my desk, but I don't know if I'll find it in time. Yeah, petty bourgeois. It's petit bourgeois, which is a French term. Okay. We have an ad starting in about 50 seconds as a heads up. foremost representatives of the oppressed people. The petty bourgeoisie is, according to its defenders, a basic ally of the working class in the struggle against capital. This is the common position taken by nearly all new Marxist-Leninist parties and organizations who have taken to calling themselves a vanguard leadership of the proletariat. The RCP USA, for example, refers to the petty bourgeoisie, which for convenience we will abbreviate to PB, as being composed of some more and some less firm allies of the proletariat. So that's like people in the working class. Everyone listens when we say petty, but not petit. Yeah, it's that's exactly right. Yeah, so it can refer to people who actually have like access to capital in some way or another. We can view these people as like what you were saying, bounce house, business owners, also like landlords, people who are not having to work for money, but they are not necessarily part of the ruling class quite yet, where they control more of the material circumstances, but they actually have somewhat of a chance of even getting into the ruling class. This is where a lot of politicians come from, or what is believed where politicians come from. Plan on getting my family into the halls of power. As a Filipino, I'm torn between loyalty to my family and loyalty to my people. It's my turn now. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to have goals and wanting to like have stability. I'm the only one in my family who cares about the people. The rest of my cousins see everyone outside the family as a resource, a means to an end. Like, I don't have to work for money. Out of my 21 years on this earth, only 2 years was spent as a worker. Yeah, but also like not being part of the like capitalist class as well. Where it means like how people have the phrase of like money, like my money makes money for me, or like money making money type of thing, of like that sort of distinction. January Sixers are notoriously petit bourgeois, supporters of fascists, people who prefer status quo even when people are suffering. Yeah. What's the capitalist class? That's also a great question. Um, yeah, exactly. Where it's people who are invested in private property, especially of like a select group of people who are able to control the material conditions that we are all experiencing. So like all of our everyday lives. So how we talk about like it's not exclusive to like the most known billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and like Mark Zuckerberg and whatnot, but like they're some of the like most prominent examples. You should lurk in the Zachap stream if you ever get a chance. Yes, it is true. He can probably speak to it a little better than I can as well. He talks very regularly about it. Yeah, I'm wondering as well. I'm going to find, I know with his YouTube channel, like with the playlists that he makes, there are a lot of really great resources he has there. Free isn't anti-capitalist. Same idea. Yes, amazing. Yes, he was one on Lacan. PragerU is just oil money slop. Yep, that is true. Yeah, landlord's welfare, housing rent, that might be interesting to you, Bunso, as well. Yeah, even some of this Karl Marx explained. We have watched plenty of videos that he has collected here, but especially with the ACAB one, some from the neoliberal politics as well. That might be a good one to be sifting through. Maybe I will break this out. Let's see. Mm. My family goes through a cycle like a scalar wave. I mean, I think that's a good point too of like of being in this cycle and how like culture, like especially like me being Indian or like Desi culture in general of wanting to provide for elders, but like it is very like cultural for many Indian people to be like, yeah, you need to be trying to make as much money as possible because of a lot of internalized systems too of the caste system being like if you can then you should be working all the time, or the ideal is to get to a place where you don't have to work for money. But rather than that being the end goal of like what you were saying of like being for the people, like the end goal, if we are thinking more on like a community basis of distributing the wealth and power that is hoarded by like people like billionaires, and making it so that people are able to benefit from their own work, that it isn't meaning like our wages are siphoned off and given to the people on the top. That's something that is referred to as like owning the means of production. So like if you work for a farm, like you work on a farm, or how you've said like working on a ranch, that like if you are providing the labor there, you should be able to have a stake in the proceeds and own part of the business. I'm looking for a specific section. I like took out my sticky notes as well when I was reading through this. That was a mistake. Okay. So, in a Marxist definition, the bourgeoisie, which is this class of people that was created out of the vestiges of feudalism. And so this is coming from a very like Western perspective as well. So just like keep that in mind. Um, but like a lot of the theory can be applied to not just Western thought. And how like kings and queens, rulers that way, that instead, like with the overthrowing of kings and queens, which in many places there still are kings and queens, they would be considered part of the ruling class, like people who are like the decision makers for what is going on in the world, and also the people who, especially who are able to influence those kinds of decision makers, like politicians. So now we have gotten to a point where we are back to feudalism, many people think, where it is not just a class of people who like own all of these businesses in the industrial war complex and pharmaceuticals and food and like shipping and manufacturing and media and entertainment, but that they have hoarded so much wealth and power that they have more wealth and power than most kings and queens, rulers in the past. So that's kind of a subverting of what Marx is talking about here. Maybe not a subverting, it's just like reframing of what we are experiencing currently that he did not necessarily see at his time when he was writing this. The weapons with which the bourgeoisie conquered feudalism are now turned against the bourgeoisie itself. The bourgeoisie has not only forged the weapons that bring death to itself, so like talking about capitalism as like this cannibalistic system that eats its own, it has also produced the men who will wield these weapons, the modern workers, the proletarian. In proportion as the bourgeoisie capital is developed, in the same proportion is developed the proletariat, the class of modern workers who live only so long as they find work, who only find work so long as their work increases capital. These forces, forced to sell themselves piecemeal, are a commodity like every other article of commerce and are consequently exposed to all the vicissitudes of competition and the fluctuations of the market. Okay, here we go. No sooner is the exploitation of the worker by the employer so far at an end that he receives his bare money wage than he is set upon by other sections of the bourgeoisie, the landlord, the shopkeeper, the pawnbroker, etc. So people who are able to have more stability and not have to work for money, that they don't have workers that are generating this wealth for them. So like this idea of like wealth, like creating more wealth is a falsehood in Marxist thought, or at least that like being able to feel like, oh, my money makes money for me, is that it's not about money making money. It is about like that money is being generated and exploited, or the workers who are generating that money are being exploited, that it is always coming from workers. So even if it is like inherited, like in generational wealth, this means that like that was stolen by many people. Like a lot of these people who are these oligarchs, they come from families that have royal ties, ties that go back to these feudal systems where there was the hoarding of wealth, land, and resources in order to maintain their power. Caught me and gave me an ounce. That's okay. I don't think that was the exact point that I was wanting to even show anyway. Okay, this, maybe I'll just go to the beginning of this part, which is probably a better illustration of these terms anyway. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, baron and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in one word, oppressor and oppressed, standing constantly in opposition to each other, carried on carried on an uninterrupted warfare, now open, now concealed, a warfare which always ended either in a revolutionary transformation of the whole of society or in the common ruin of the contending classes. In early historic epochs, we find almost everywhere a complete organization of society into various degrees, a manifold gradation of social rank. In ancient Rome, we find patricians, knights, plebeians, slaves. In the Middle Ages, feudal lords, vassals, guild masters, apprentices, and serfs. And within almost all of these classes, again, further divisions. So talking about all of these hierarchies that exist in various societies. Yeah. Good job, big homie. Modern bourgeois society, springing from the wreck of feudal society, had not had not abolished class antagonisms. So just with like these revolutions that say like we don't want a king, we don't want this type of ruler, and then there are systems that are developed like so-called democracies, that they then are the new type of rulers. So what is referred to as like the ruling class. And that many of these people, they are controlled by business owners, people who actually have capital, who are at the top stratas of society where they have the most wealth. And it's not an accident that these same people are largely the ones who are descendants of people from these previous feudal systems. It's just a like rebranding of class warfare, essentially. Let's see. Modern industry has established that world market for which the discovery of America prepared the way under colonization. The world market has given an immense development to commerce, to navigation, and to communication by land. This development reaction in its turn on the expansion of industry, and in proportion as industry, commerce, navigation, and railways extended, in the same proportion the bourgeoisie developed, multiplied its capital, and thrust into the background all classes transmitted from the Middle Ages. We see, therefore, how the modern bourgeoisie is itself the product of a long course of development of a series of revolutions in the methods of production and exchange. So if there aren't revolutions that effectively dismantle the systems that exist beforehand, that it can just be a lot of the same kinds of actors, but just in different spaces. And how there's just a reshuffling of the same people in the halls of power rather than it being distributed to the masses, so that people, everyday people, us common people, have more say in what is going on, that we actually are able to benefit from the labor that we create, that it is not being taken by people who are higher up in this hierarchy of class. So, talking about the bourgeoisie, wherever it has conquered power, has destroyed all feudal, patriarchal, and idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder all the many-colored feudal bonds which united men to their natural superiors, and has left no other tie twixt man and man, but naked self-interest and callous cash payment. It has drowned religious ecstasy, chivalrous enthusiasm, and middle-class sentimentality in the ice-cold water of egotistical calculation. It has transformed personal worth into mere exchange value and substituted for countless dearly bought chartered freedoms the one and only unconscionable freedom of free trade. It has, in one word, replaced an exploitation veiled by religious and political illusion by exploitation open, unashamed, direct, and brutal. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every profession previously venerated and regarded as honorable. It has turned doctor, lawyer, priest, poet, and philosopher into its paid wage workers. Okay, and then it's getting into that other section that I read. I'm going to pull up to something that Zach was talking about. Okay, let's watch this real quick. Though I don't know why this isn't working. Here we go. Sometimes it can be my tech freaks out. When I try to go on playlists, it just goes like very quickly from video to video.
Class and class conflict are both incredibly critical in understanding the nature of
Oh, also, I don't know if you're a subscriber. Maybe I should wait until this ad is done. I have watched a few of Halim's videos. Go check out his content. He has some really great educational content. Just the idea that no law can protect both the working class and the capitalist class at the same time was a really good point. What ad? Oh, are you subscribed? Did you not have to see the ad? Okay, never mind then. I waited just in case there was an ad going. Okay. What is class conflict?
capitalism and the
So this is with like a Marxist understanding, but when we're talking about capitalists, they're part of this class called the bourgeoisie. The working class, people who have to work for money, are the proletarians.
of the modern state. The casual understanding of class is that it's got something to do with how much money you have. You've got the rich, the poor, and the middle class. However, the Marxist understanding of class is a much more precise and useful tool, and it's this understanding of class that I want to explore in this video. The first step in understanding what class is recognizing we are all fundamentally material beings. We are not these immortal creatures that exist outside the physical world. We are material beings with material needs we must satisfy in order to live. So where the concept of class comes in is when we begin to ask how a given individual must go about satisfying these material needs. What means of sustenance are available to this individual? So a farmer's means of sustenance would be farming the land. Identifying the means of sustenance is another way of identifying how the individual relates to the means of production. Quick side note, the means of production, put simply, is the stuff that produces stuff. So when we ask how someone must go about sustaining themselves, it's a question of how they relate to this production line. And there's no one who's exempt from this production line. Everyone relates to it somehow. Alright, so the farmer's relation to the means of production are quite straightforward. He owns the land, he owns the tools, and he must labor the land to sustain himself. This would be his class. A given individual's class is determined by how one relates to the means of production. Now, on its own, this isn't particularly useful. Who gives a shit how someone relates to the means of production? The real usefulness of this concept of class is that it gives us insight into the material interests of a given class. Let's go back to the farmer for a second.
Yeah, and when that term material conditions, material interests, it means like the physical experiences that we have that affect our bodies and our livelihoods and how we are able to continue living.
We understand their relation to
Like
the means
the
of
physical
production.
world.
They own the tools, they own the land, etc. Understanding this, the farmer's interests become quite clear. It's in the farmer's interest for good weather, a plentiful yield, minimal pest interference, hopes his tools won't wear down too quickly, and he hopes he can preserve his yields for as long as possible. His material interests are straightforward. Now let's suppose there are 5 friends and they're all farmers. They all have the same relation to the means of production. They all own the land together, they all own the tools together, and to sustain themselves they must labor the land. So these individuals would be a part of the same class. And in being a part of the same class, their material interests are the same as well. They hope for good weather, good yield, minimal wear on tools, etc. None of their material interests are in opposition, because they have the exact same relation to the means of production. Okay, so now we're going to add a bit of complexity to this. Suppose there's a 6th individual, and we'll affectionately call him Fuckface. So Fuckface owns the tools, and he owns the...
I love as well, like, the stock photos that are chosen with, like, the... what is it called? The overlay. That's not the exact word I'm looking for. But, the watermarks of, like, you can't use this, using it anyway. But it also is, like, such a great illustration of, like, showing this in very clear terms of what he is talking about.
The other 5 don't own anything. All they have is their labor. Fuckface's means of sustenance, i.e. his relation to the means of production, is getting the other 5 to work his tools and land so he can eat. Fuckface occupies a different class than the others, as he has a different relation to the means of production, and thus has different and conflicting material interests. Fuckface wants to take as much of the yield as possible for himself, leaving just enough grain to sustain the other 5, but no more. The surplus grain he obtains can be used to sustain other individuals who may carry out the force needed to get the other 5 to work, or support a militia to take over more lands, etc.
Yep, like
his material
cops.
interests are to take as much of the yield as possible, whereas the 5 farmers, their interest is to keep as much of the yield as possible to reduce their workloads. The interests of Fuckface and the interests of the farmers are in conflict. It is not a cooperative relationship, but a combative one, where both classes struggle against one another. This society I've laid out is a society in conflict, and the only way to keep this society together is through the use of coercive and manipulative forces. Otherwise, this society would fall apart. Okay, so far I've been talking about class in this somewhat abstract and hypothetical sense, but let's bring this concept home. Let's take a look at our society, a capitalist society, and understand the classes that constitute it. Under capitalism, there are 2 distinct and primary classes: capitalists and workers. The relationship capitalists have to the means of production is that they own them privately. Their means of sustenance is getting others to labor on these productive means to produce goods and services to be sold. The relationship workers have to the means of production is renting their labor out. These 2 classes have distinct and conflicting material interests. Capitalists want workers to work as hard as possible and pay them as little as possible for their labor, just enough to sustain them and propagate their race.
Yeah, so that they can continue to have workers, that capitalists, people in the bourgeois class. So when we were talking about Weingarten rights last week, where you have the benefit of having a union in the workplace, that is where like people who are just wanting to access their regular benefits as a worker, that the capitalist class of people do not want us to be humanizing ourselves, to actually be having these types of rights, that we need to be working harder, we need to be showing up sick, we shouldn't be taking time off, that even if you are doing things quote unquote like right or like by policy, that doesn't mean that you will not be exploited. That does not mean that you will not be on the receiving end of harm by a supervisor or manager that represents this larger system of exploitation, that they are interested in keeping people working and working, especially like the more we are actually accessing these types of benefits and acknowledging our own humanity, the more room that is opened up for resistance to the system as a whole, of people being like, why are we even working like this to begin with? Why are we working ourselves to death? Why is it that we are satisfied with the crumbs of living in this society where we can barely afford anything when there are some people who are benefiting very greatly from what is happening, who do not have to work, that are just able to make money because of the class that they are born in, and how in this system of capitalism that we are in, that the laws that are made, the policies that are implemented are used to protect capital of people in a certain class, that they have all of this interest in where their money is being invested, which largely is what informs world events, that informs the working conditions that we all are working in as well, which is why there are so many laws that prevent unionizing in the US, unionizing, you know, all over the world, but like particularly in places that are overtly capitalist, that it makes it so that the capitalist class, the people who own all of these things and are benefiting the most from our labor, that they are able to continue their exploitation without any sort of resistance.
Interests of the workers, on the other hand, is that they want to be paid as much as possible for the labor they do. These interests are in direct conflict. These classes are in direct conflict. It is not a cooperative relationship, no matter how many times capitalists say otherwise. It is a combative relationship and a relationship of exploitation. The workers are the ones who generate the wealth, and it's the capitalists who skim the surplus generated and keep it for themselves. To further the interests of one class is to necessarily hurt the interests of the other. Any policy that claims to be beneficial for both classes is a lie, plain and simple. Our capitalist society is a society in conflict. The only way the society is held together is through the use of coercive and manipulative forces. This is the primary role of the state, a tool of oppression used to protect the interests of the capitalist class by holding together and maintaining this exploitative system. In simpler terms, the modern state exists to secure the existence of the capitalist class and to advance their interests. Without the state, the capitalist mode of production would collapse. This conflict between the two classes is a conflict that cannot be resolved under capitalism, for this is the nature of capitalism. There are those who privately own the means of production, and there are those who rent themselves out. For this conflict, a conflict between two diametrically opposed classes, to resolve itself, requires the ultimate break of either class, and with it, the passing of capitalism. The capitalist class cannot exist without the laboring class. The ruin of the laboring class spells the common ruin of all classes. The socialist sees the only legitimate way forward is the abolition of the capitalist class, freeing the means of production from private ownership and moving it into the common domain to be operated by all, democratically. This radical and revolutionary reconstitution of society.
Fucking state, fucking hate the state, fucking hate pigs. Yep. Hate capitalism. Yep. It's a really good movie I watched in high school called Blue Collar. I don't know if I've heard of that. Underrated 70s movie. Oh, Richard Pryor's in it. Interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out. Take back the commons. Hello, Water. Welcome. If you all do not follow or subscribe to Androgynous Water, go follow and subscribe to them. Fellow anti-fascist, anti-capitalist streamer.
Not only spells the death of capitalism, but establishes a classless society as well. A society in which everyone runs and operates the means of production democratically is a society in which everyone's relation to the means of production.
How are you doing,
equal.
Water?
This is what's meant by a classless society. A classless society doesn't mean a society in which everyone is the same in every single regard and any deviation from the norm will be put down immediately. It just means a society in which everyone is equal in their relation to the means of production. That's it. As everyone relates to the means of production equally, everyone's material interests are congruent. There is no adversarial economic group with opposing material interests. All are equal. As there is no class conflict, the modern state as a tool of oppression is no longer needed. And thus, with a classless society, anarchists and communists see to ultimately do away with the state as a tool of oppression. If there's anything you take away from this video, it should be this concept of class conflict. In a capitalist system where there are two distinct groups with different and oppositional modes of satisfying their material needs, we find a permanent and unyielding conflict of material interests between the classes. This class...
Yeah, thanks for being here, Water. So like what you've said, Boonso, and like fighting fascists and fighting the state, it's like fascists, liberals, people who are wanting to maintain the status quo, although there are many fascists that think that like it needs to, they are leaning more into colonizer mentality and tactics of ethnic cleansing and white supremacy and imposing this domination of feeling like the system is not going far enough, of these accelerationists. But like fascism is late stage capitalism, but also like we need to be, in my mind, framing it within, it is still colonization of capitalism, cannot be separated from the stealing, acquisition of land, and the extraction of resources, and ethnic cleansing and genocide of people, and that this is all for money, hoarding money and wealth that is capital. You can view like money, I guess, is a way to be like, oh, that's capital, but it's a way in which money is hoarded to such a degree that it is able to influence society, influence world events, especially. So like in US politics, or I guess just like any politics in general, any type of group that is like lobbying, trying to make it so that decisions are made for companies, that like a part of capitalism is that like companies are viewed as human beings, like companies have rights. That is capitalism, of it protecting the system, protecting the business rather than workers. A lot of fascists want even more fascism than what we already have. I know, it's like, it's not enough for like the world to be built for you. It's not enough for that, but this is why like it's like colonization, these forms of human dignity that are in hierarchies, like capitalism as well, fascism, that they're also related. It's just kind of like a different branding of these things, that it is cannibalistic of people. If they are wanting to have these hierarchies of human dignity where some people are at the top, where they're hoarding all of this stuff, it's not sustainable whatsoever, where workers will, the common people will be so upset by deteriorating conditions, of not being paid enough, of feeling like we can't afford to live and have housing and have food, that there will be a rising up, and in order to suppress this, the people on top keep pushing and pushing for our disempowerment. So it's not sustainable, and also capitalists, fascists, our colonizers are constantly infighting because they don't care about humanity, they care about their own position. We also have an ad starting in about 5 seconds, just as a heads up. They can't even recognize their own privilege. They think they're oppressed. Yeah, it really is wild, the privilege that's like, you have to be so disconnected from being oppressed to like completely reframe what oppression even means in that way.
Conflict makes capitalism an inherently volatile system and necessitates the existence of the state to maintain this affair of exploitation. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you now have a more intimate understanding of class and class conflict. I also want to thank you all for the incredible response I got on my last video, What is Neoliberalism? If you haven't seen it, definitely do so. It was just really heartwarming to see all the comments and even have some of you share it on Twitter. That was wild. Also, a big thank you to Leonard Balk, my first ever patron. Honestly, thank you. Also, a big thank you to Beckerel. I had finished recording the audio to this video, but I wanted to take the time to thank you as well. If you also want to support me on Patreon and help fuel radicalism on YouTube, you can do so at Halim Al Ra. You can also follow me on Twitter at Halim Al Ra and tweet at me directly. And lastly, of course, you can subscribe for more leftist content.
Yeah, they do some really great work. I'm not subscribed on my streaming one, but now I am. Hopefully that can provide a little more explanation of these class distinctions, where like how you have said before, Bunso, that you are more focused on like up and down resistance in politics versus left and right, and that is a very like clear way to be talking about class, of some people who are wanting to maintain the system, or even to, like what you were saying with many fascists, have this acceleration of what capitalism is or what colonization is, because it's all related. I think we're talking about a lot of the same things, but just with different names. That it is about trying to maintain the system or accelerate it to a point where people are so disempowered that they have no options for resistance. So it really is about like the people who are like thinking about the class of people who are benefiting the most from what is happening in the world, especially all of these atrocities. It's a very small amount of people, like when we talk about the 1%. So it really is like the 1% versus the 99%. And there is effective global capitalism so that we have a lot of this oppression globally, but this global capitalism is even able to exist in the first place because there has been this global colonization that existed. And even before colonization, of these classes that exist within various societies, or these hierarchies of human dignity where there is non-consensual domination of land and resources and people to justify people's position of power that they are born into rather than what they are like earning. So like this idea of like merit and like earning a place in society, like class mobility is not really a thing. So like people want to, like the Elon Musks of the world, like that's very much a capitalist, colonizer, fascist, all of these things rather than distribute wealth and power and work at all, that they're born into money, that he has like Nazi heritage as well, of like seeing all of this be connected, like existing in apartheid South Africa, wanting to create that in the US, of essentially saying that, like, in order to justify my own existence, I have to, in his mind probably, adopt these opinions about that some people are just born better, where this leads to eugenics based off of white supremacy and colonizer mentality, to say, like, I'm just naturally better than other people, rather than addressing class and the need to dismantle all of these systems. I don't know if that's helpful. That was like a long and probably roundabout way to go about answering your questions. But yeah, I like what Bounce was saying. Zach does a really good job of going over this on his stream. Yeah, he can probably speak to it much better than I can, so highly recommend his content. Yeah, and like, if you do still have questions, like, clearly I do not have, like, I'm not as familiar with certain things as what I would like to be, of just like continuing the education. We can be going over it together. It's good for me as well. Okay, we'll continue with this video, but yeah, the warfare that we are experiencing, like, who is actually benefiting from all of this? It is the people invested in weapons manufacturers, the politicians that are enriching themselves off of the money that they're receiving donations from because of weapons manufacturers, AI, and surveillance. That there are very few people, like a lot of the same people, who are quite literally invested in all of these industries, that they have cornered all of these industries, that they are part of this exclusive class, that they are the ones really who are only benefiting from what is going on. The next Great Depression starts after autumn. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. The market will go up for a bit in October, then plummet. Yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised with that happening, especially with global events.
Hunger, they want to end it. You know, people don't want to, you know, get another tax credit on health care. They want us to make sure they can afford their health care and that it is available for everybody. And people don't want us to manage wars around the world. They want us to bring them to an end. So, I mean, I think we do our party great harm when we start to have this kind of infighting. I mean, I trust the people. And for me, I tell people all the time that whoever wins the Democratic nomination, you know, in a particular race in my state, I'm going to support them.
So you have been in Congress for almost 30 years. You have championed...
Depressions are planned and they profit off of it. Inside trader. Yeah, and that, I think, is a great illustration of, like, if we think about who actually benefits from whatever is going on in the world, the people who consistently benefit, who are able to continue to enrich themselves, to gain more monetary value, that they are the ones who are part of the capitalist class. Of, like, if you think of depressions, of, like, who are the people who, like, especially with recessions, the people who, when all of this happened, they all of a sudden buy a ton of stock in, like, dollar stores, or they are the ones who are influencing the stock market. And how, like, the stock market is like a made up thing, essentially, where it's like only a few people are actually like winning when it comes to all of that bullshit going on. But the people you can pinpoint as being part of the capitalist class, the people who are largely invested in these ethnic cleansing projects, eugenics, white supremacy, vestiges, the continuation of colonization, that it is a very small amount of people, and that no matter what happens in the world, but especially when there are atrocities, that they are the few to benefit. Hello, Turd Bomb. Welcome. 1% of the US population own 50% of the stocks. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then they try to make themselves feel better by donating to like so-called charities or nonprofits, which is a way to launder money, launder reputation, and have it be this type of condescending savior complex rather than, substantially changing the conditions that would help people, which is taxing these people more, making it so that their wealth and power is distributed, having limits on their influence on politics and world events, the accumulation of wealth, that would be a much greater use of society and their money, or a greater service to society and use of their money, is by actually making it so that they aren't able to hoard it to begin with. They don't even pay taxes. They just pay fines. Yep, exactly. Crypto is the same shit. Yep. So like all of these industries, like it's not an accident that you have the same people who are invested in crypto and AI and in pharmaceuticals and so-called entertainment and media and war and weapons manufacturers, where it's like, it's a lot of the same people, and they are the ones who are the actual decision makers with what is going on. You won't get shit from them by taxing them. They'll always never pay their taxes. You want their stuff. I've done. Yeah, and so this is where it's like, where we have to discuss tactics and revolutionary tactics, what it means to actually build a significant resistance to what is going on and to address their power. And a lot of the time, it comes from collective power and organizing to address the system as a whole. Because when, like, as we've seen with, like, Luigi Mangione, of, like, I'm not going to cry for a capitalist. I don't think any of us should. But he, like, after that CEO dying, that he was replaced with another CEO, another capitalist. So it's like, unless there is something that is significantly changing to address the system as a whole, to take it down, and also to build systems outside of it, then like nothing is really going to make a difference. In fact, there's crypto coins that are hard-coded. You peg to $1. Wouldn't buy it. Recuperation is so passé. I'm all about recuperation. Yeah. And like reforming broke boy. Yeah. All of us in the working class, broke boys. Broke people. Ugh. But it's not, and this is where there's so much propaganda of like, oh, well, people aren't working hard enough. People don't want to work these days. It's like, maybe if we weren't exploited at every turn, that we would, and we were actually addressing the conditions for what we are experiencing. It's not about people not wanting to work. Of like, who are the real people who don't want to work? The people who don't have to work. The people where all they are doing is stealing from us, from the labor and wages that we generate, rather than them actually working. So, I mean, we've talked about all of this. Like, there's a new Red Scare. I do want to get to, I know it may not be ethical to exit out of the middle of a video, but if you are interested in finishing this video, I will share it. I do want to get to, like, the heart of why this is even an issue to begin with, or like the history. Thriving in the sweet treat economy. What are the return rates? I don't understand willingly being a worker. Yeah, and this is part of the rage, you know, of like, why should we be working ourselves quite literally to death, especially like if we aren't offered benefits for these things, if like those are crumbs for the work that we generate, the wealth that we generate for these people. Okay. So all of this, like how in the previous video that we were watching, where he was describing class warfare of the powers that be shape-shifting, whether it's in a feudal system, whether it's in with the bourgeois or capitalists, and also like we're back to a feudal system with like techno-fascists and such, because they've accumulated so much wealth and power that they have more power than like most like world rulers of the past. Of how this is also controlled in the past and currently as well by like forms of brainwashing and propaganda, of buying into the so-called American dream, of buying into religious nationalism, by making it so the masses are more malleable and easier to control by saying it's that person why you are not able to have your needs met, your material conditions, the physical things that you are experiencing, that everything is deteriorating, that it is because of immigrants rather than the people who are controlling these systems to begin with and creating them and upholding them. And the people who also are the ones influencing immigration policy, who is considered an immigrant. That, once again, this has to be called back to colonization, that it is colonization, and how the need to justify colonization, the need to justify all of these inhumane, anti-human policies cannot be separated from other ways of controlling people's minds, like religion, through the media and entertainment, to make sure that we are being defined and not defining ourselves. Also, hello, Turd Bomb. Welcome. How are things with you? Okay, so in our pivot to literature story time, I did want to play this about King James and the Scottish witches. So this video talks about King James and his life and his history, but also religion, how he wanted and created, I mean, he himself did not create it, but greatly influenced and decided what would even be in the King James Bible. This is that King James. How he also was the one to send people to Jamestown in the US and Virginia to colonize the Americas, while he was also interested in continuing the English colonization of Scotland. So, like, he was very interested in empire, of uniting Scotland and England and Ireland, and how this is all part of this imperialist colonization, ethnic cleansing project. And one of the ways he did this to justify all of this is by creating an other. We do have an ad starting in about 50 seconds, just as a heads up. So, like, one of these others was to create this fear mongering of witches, primarily women, but it also included men, also gender expansive identities, and that it focused primarily on indigenous practices. So, even if someone was not involved in some sort of like magic, but just any sort of medicinal care, any sort of indigenous tradition, that this could be viewed as witchcraft, as a justification for the dehumanization of people that were on land that he wanted to acquire to continue this type of domination politically and non-consensually, because it's not like it was happening in a democratic way. Not bad. Some bullshit today and yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry. What's going on? I mean, if you're interested in sharing, not like you have to. Work for me or I'll deprive you of the money you need to eat, drink, sleep safely. Oh yeah, I'll gamble 6% of your paycheck. Yep. You do get a say in how they invest it. Yeah, the retirement industry, oh, I forgot that this ad was going on. Okay. Actually, I guess I should probably prep this video. Okay, welcome back to people who aren't subscribed, but like to speak to what you're talking about in the chat of like the retirement industry, like of 401ks and such, that it is, this whole industry is one of like the biggest investors and politicians across the board. So like people who do skim off the top of like, even like with me being pushed out of my job where like I wasn't even really informed that like, oh, you have some retirement that kicked in. And this is part of like the nefarious nature of capitalists wanting to keep the money that you are generating, of like me not even being aware that I was enrolled in a program, and then also like trying to withdraw this money. It has been like such a pain in the ass, and like that is because of them not wanting wanting me to actually take the money that I generated, and that it's not even the full amount that I was able to generate, that you have to be working for a certain amount of years before you can, and it just is a racket. Hello, Fendi. Welcome. How are things with you? Isn't the dollar collapsing? Wouldn't that make things like retirement accounts useless? I mean, if we're even able to retire at that point, of like that our wages are not just deteriorating and expenses going up so that we don't have to just be working the entire time. And I mean, the dollar is deteriorating, but this is where, like, once again, we have to look at, like, okay, so even if the dollar is deteriorating, who is benefiting even when this happens? It is the 1%. Spent all day at an exhausting, unorthodox install, and now management is on my ass. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know that, especially if you're getting bullshit from management, as we were talking about, like, resisting these power imbalances. I know I mentioned this before just because they recently had some wins, the IBEW, the, is it international? Yeah, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Like you can look up local chapters that, like, getting connected with some of them may be helpful. I think the people who own assets like land, houses, etc. would be fine if the dollar is poop. Yep, exactly. Yeah, they don't care because they don't have to work because we generate that work and wealth. I was at my father-in-law's place and it's like they think I was goofing off and wasting time. Yeah, that's bullshit. Yeah, it's stuff like that where like you can still be doing your job, but if it is not falling within like a specific definition of what they like it is about control, that you can be on the receiving end of this bullshit. Like, it doesn't matter if you're doing things like even like by the book and going to your father-in-law's place. It just is a way to exert control so people are not what they view as like going rogue, but you using your skill set to actually like help people. Imagine that. But especially if this continues, I wonder if like a local chapter, like if they are looking for, I mean, ideally you would be connected to your local chapter of the union, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. But even still, if there is like retaliation that is going on, that is something that they can help with. Or even if they are not able to help directly, you may be able to talk to people who have experience with this kind of behavior and they can provide solidarity at the very least and just being like, yeah, I have experienced that. That sucks. But also like give advice for things that might work. But I'm sorry you're going through that. That's bullshit. Okay, so we do have a disclaimer here. We're talking about King James and Scottish witches. This is part of this colonization tactics, I should say, but this video contains descriptions of torture, not intended for children or easily annoyed adults. You know, so just throwing that out there because this is, once again, a pattern. So, like, as we are calling out the war crimes of the US military, of the IDF, that, like, this is a pattern of behavior of stuff that has happened in history. It's not like it just came out of nowhere. Okay, I may need to refresh this as well, so it doesn't yell at me and say, content not
had the
found.
power and the
What? Okay. This like soothing music with this trigger warning about torture is wild. Okay, I'm actually going to put that in the chat. Okay, I'll pin that. Here we go.
Okay, so King James, that King James, that King James, the one from the Bible, once got so spooked out by witches that he eventually researched and wrote a book on demonology. Meaning James, this great king of England and Scotland, the name tied...
Yeah, so he wrote a book on demonology. If you are the one writing books about demons, shouldn't we be taking a harsher look at you, James? But once again, this is like the classic tactic of like defining your so-called enemy and opposition and then basing it around this common cause of feeling righteous and self-important and like skewing what it even means to be moral, of defining morality with him creating the King James Bible.
Bible on the throne is also the only Christian king in history to write a book on demons. And yes, you heard that right, demonology. It's bizarre, it's unexpected, and it's exactly why we're diving in. Because this isn't just a quirky footnote in history. It's a shadowy chapter of the Reformation, a grim slice of the 16th century, and a really haunting moment for Scotland itself. and at the heart of it stands King James. But back then, he was still King James VI of Scotland. But let's uncover what drove a king to write such a work, and how it fueled one of Scotland's darkest obsessions.
This is where we need to call out, look at how he's dressed. What is viewed as like masculine or feminine or queer, especially of like presentation, of how this is ever moving in society and how this is deeply political as well, and colonizing of who is defining what it even means to be masculine and feminine, and that there is this erasure of identity outside of the binary that has a history in indigenous cultures and societies, that like it all is deeply politically motivated. See, look at this. Like, you have a ruffle collar. How is this not queer? Tell me that. It's all
To unravel the
relative
witch trials that
to the
gripped
moment.
Scotland in the 1590s,
Who is able
we
to
must
define
begin
it?
with the man who stood at the epicenter, King James VI of Scotland. Born June 19, 1566, in Edinburgh Castle, James entered a world of chaos. His mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, was forced to abdicate just a year later in 1567, fleeing to England, leaving the infant James as king under a series of regents. His childhood was anything but stable, in other words, marked by a kidnapping at Stirling Castle in 1570, the assassination of his regent, the Earl of Moray, that same year, and the brutal murder of another regent, the Earl of Lennox, in 1571.
So again, like people in the ruling class, like his family, he viewed this as like, that's not to say like, oh, that would be uncomfortable to experience. That wouldn't be fun. But also the fact that it even is happening to begin with is that you have these hierarchies where people are vying for power because many people feel powerless or they're wanting to gain more power, where it is established that in order to exist in a way to be comfortable, that people have to be at the very top, rather than being like, oh, how about like everyday people, like the common people are suffering way more than what you are experiencing in their everyday lives, that like you're experiencing this. Okay, well, what about like the farmer and farmhand, that they experience this exact same situation, but they don't have noble blood, and so they don't have like all of these resources to fall back on. So just like the continued like victimization of the ruling class, when like there are these systems that they benefit from and create, why they're there to begin with, that they then are not wanting to address the system in general that creates some of the circumstances of their own pain that they experience, which is what kind of going back to of like what I was reading in Marx. Oh, I should have saved that, of saying that like even people who are supposedly benefiting the most are still hurt in many ways, even if it is just like this paranoia, constant paranoia, and loneliness, to be like, oh, I'm such a victim of like nobody likes me because I have so much. That's like, okay, well, you're helping to create this system where you have so much. How about you would be less lonely, you would be less paranoid if you distributed your wealth and power and land and all of these things that you are using to uphold these systems of oppression.
Political intrigue swirled around James like the mists over the highlands. Perhaps because of this, James grew up a wary, scholarly, and a kind of bookish man who was also very protective, in fact, fiercely protective of his crown. You might say James' platform, to use a modern political idea, was three things: royal authority, Protestantism, and the eradication of any element in Scotland that threatened any of these two issues. In this case,
which means indigenous identity of Highlanders, of Scottish clans, where people who are falling outside of this idea of what it means to be English, this idea of whiteness, especially of, Scottish people, Irish people being racialized, how this is just a constantly moving goalpost by oppressors to be like, well, you're in the in group and you aren't. And how this needs to be called out because of like the political agendas that are tied to it, rather than these being inherently born in people of being in situations that are more degraded, of it being imposed because of these hierarchical systems that exist, not because people are inherently not worth as much of another person. I'm part of the Grant clan, of the Scottish clan.
And James was going to destroy them. So
That's
by
cool.
1590, now in his mid-20s, King James of Scotland had emerged as a ruler of striking intellect. Fluent in Latin, he was a poet and a devout Protestant, steeped in the teachings of John Knox's Reformation. He was obsessed, in particular, with the doctrine of the divine right of kings, a belief he later articulated in the 1598 treatise, The True Laws of Free Monarchies. James is really one of the strongest to say that kings on this earth have no checks and balances. They can't be held accountable in this life, only in the life to come. God will get them in the end. That was always the idea. But you can't censure or...
Yeah. Oh, cool. I love that. On my dad's side. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, if there's any like history as well that I'm missing, like, do include anything if you would like.
Move a king from office.
Yeah, this is a typical thing of like, well, why should we hold people accountable now? Like, they're going to get their comeuppance in the next life. Of like, how about we don't wait for the next life? How about we get justice now in what it actually means? Of people paying for the harm that they are causing other human beings. You're going to revert to my indigenous relations. I love that. Yeah, and also like what you're saying, the trauma of just being part of a family, which is why, like chosen family is so important and also radical in many ways, where like we're taught in so many societies and cultures of like, no, the family is the end all be all. You need to sacrifice everything for your family. And it's like, well, what if your family doesn't like you? What if your family has rejected you in many ways? Where does that leave you? Instead of it being your fault, how about we actually create real family and what it means? I'm glad that you're doing what feels good for you.
James' position. Also, because he's king, everything is going to be Protestant. Therefore, if you are a Catholic, or in this case, if you are part of the cabal of witches that are trying to destroy Scotland, well, James...
So Catholic, also highlighting a lot of Catholicism in Ireland, but also Indigenous identity in Ireland, also Indigenous identity in Scotland. So just saying that this is demonic, that they're all witches, especially if there are women who are unmarried. They were more likely to be called witches, especially if they are organizing and helping communities outside of these oppressive ones, viewed as witches. How this shows itself time and time again of, groups that are actually trying to create a better society outside of the oppressor are quite literally demonized. And it cannot be ignored of like this depiction of the devil, of being viewed as black, of many instances at that time of demonology, James describing the devil of being black, of this cannot be separated from racism, and how racism is embedded in the King James Bible itself. So we do have another ad starting in about 50 seconds.
Come down with the force of the entire kingdom. The story begins with the betrothal of James and Anne of Denmark, a powerful connection to another Protestant nation, an important alliance in the percolating anger of what would soon become the wars of religion.
Just more inbreeding of the ruling class.
For now, James was simply a young king waiting for his bride to arrive. Only she didn't. She was late. And then word came. Anne had boarded a ship for Scotland, and not once, but several times, the wind blew them off course and forced them back. Not to be a man short on chivalry, James decided he was going to mount an effort to go and fetch his new love. And he set sail in 1589 from the city of Leith. His destination was Elsinore Castle. Yes, that Elsinore Castle from Hamlet, where Anne awaited for her prince. The journey, though, was anything but smooth. Storms battered the fleet at the Orkney Islands, nearly claiming James's life, and when he finally returned back to Scotland on May 1st, 1590, with Anne finally in tow, docking in that same city of Leith, he was a changed man, convinced that dark forces were conspiring against his kingdom of Scotland and the Scottish people. You see, this is a bit of a mutation.
So, I mean, we can attribute this to many things, but also someone who's like really never been told no in their life, where they're like, wait, but I'm royal, so this means that like I'm all powerful, like not acknowledging that like nature, Mother Earth, that the elements have more power than you, puny little human, because you have no concept of what it means to have like humility at all. And he's like, there have to be dark forces that are stopping me because I'm royal. That means that I have the divine right to rule, and I am sanctified by God to justify his position and like make him feel good about himself, rather than actually admitting like, yeah, sometimes nature does this shit, and it means you're just a human. It doesn't mean that you're God.
Might say, of a previous problem. Denmark had already been gripped by witch hunts for some time, influenced by others in Europe and the growing panic over diabolical conspiracies. James was impressionable, and he was surrounded now by Dutch scholars who began to argue that witchcraft was likely to blame for what was going on with Anne's disaster of a voyage. This wasn't just about the weather, they argued. It was about the survival of God's anointed king. And Scotland was no stranger to the fear of witches either. In fact, just 3 years prior to his birth in 1563...
That's so embarrassing to be, like, so self-centered in that way. It can't just be that the ocean is doing what it does, that I have to acknowledge weather, that actually it means that all of Satan's minions, that all of hell is out to get me. That's like, okay, calm the fuck down.
The Scottish Parliament passed the Witchcraft Act, a harsh law that declared witchcraft and even consulting with witches punishable by death. The ink had barely dried on this document when James even came into the world, but for decades, that law simmered more quietly. Large-scale witch hunts were rare. The act was more of a shadow we see in the statute books from time to time than a fire in the streets. There really is not the mobs of people that are chasing down witches everywhere. That is, until King James' reign. That changed everything. James' harrowing voyage to Denmark in 1589, paired with a fragile sense of his own security forged by a turbulent childhood, became the spark. When he stepped...
But also how, like, there is always expected to have, like, endless empathy for the ruling class, these rulers and people who are directly oppressing people, rather than acknowledging, like, oh, you know who's suffering more? How about sailors that this happens to them, and they aren't claiming that it's God out to get them. I mean, maybe some are, but like, that it's because you are God, that you are God's vessel on earth, that they're just like, yeah, I have to work and pay for my family, or just like work to survive, and we're in a shipwreck. Imagine that. We're human beings against the forces of nature.
On the Scottish soil in 1590, with his new queen, Anne of Denmark, by his side, whispers were already spreading A sinister conspiracy was afoot, they said. Witches had woven dark spells to drown the king and his bride beneath the furious waves of the North Sea. But for James, this wasn't just rumor. It was personal. Some 20 miles east of Edinburgh, along the Firth of Forth, lies a coastal town named North Berwick. And yes, that is going to be the last time I pronounce this in the Scottish way. My Scottish friends can choose to be mad at me. That's fine. I'm going to pronounce it like myself, which is my muddled accent. Yeah, I read your comments. The North Berwick is
I mean, I wish you would keep pronouncing it in the Scottish way.
a small fishing town, with the quaint stone cottages that are buffeted by the winds coming in from the harbor. It's an unlikely place for a national crisis. Yet, in November 1590, it became ground zero. The trouble began with a young servant girl named Gillis Duncan. Now, Gillis lived a quiet life in the nearby village of Trinnet. And Gillis was employed by a really kind of nasty piece of work by the name of David Seaton. And he was the deputy bailiff of the little village. And he was a staunch Calvinist. He wasn't a pastor, he wasn't a theologian. He was simply one of these folks who was always on the lookout for the boogeyman. And he was, we must say, thoroughly obsessed with Gillis. In fact, a lot of historians stop short of this. I won't. I think he's a creep. I think what he's doing towards her is essentially stalking her and using some sort of inappropriate fascination with Gillis to enact his sort of twistedness. You see,
Hello. Non-consensual domination. And how it's like, oh, a woman doesn't want me, you're a witch. It's like, okay. Do you see how this is so related to what is happening now with all of these, like, incels and, like, the Andrew Tate of it all? Of, like, so, like, if you aren't going to, want to be with me, then that means that, like, you're evil, that you have to be dominated because this is your, like, natural position in life. It's to be subservient to men. That's like, I wonder where that idea comes from.
Was a girl of humble origins and humble means, probably no older than 16. And she had a reputation of slipping out under the cover of night. Heaven forbid 16-year-olds act like themselves. Whispers followed, and tales of her uncanny knack for healing the sick, easing fevers with herbs, and gathering things from around the surrounding woods to help, started to mount a case, at least in Satan's
like being
mind,
kind, caring about other humans.
Again, he was obsessed with her. He felt it was his duty to know where she was at all times, where she was going off to at night, and he, as deputy bailiff, had the power and the zeal to figure this out himself. Whatever she was up to, Seaton knew it was sinister. So around mid-November in 1590, he decided to take matters into his own hands. In a dank cellar, cold, stone-walled beneath his own home, Seaton subjected Gillis to the thumbscrews, a brutal device of iron that clamps down on her fingers, crushing bone and sinew with each twist. He also used the witch's bridle, which is this iron muzzle that also pierces the mouth. Under this torment, Gillis broke and confessed to all sorts of things. Now, a quick note on torture, not the thing I thought I would be talking about, but here we are. In no circumstances ever is it the case that torture ever reveals some hidden truth. I know we see that all the time in movies and shows. That doesn't happen in real life. It doesn't happen in history. If you don't believe me, just see interviews with CIA
doesn't happen
operatives.
now.
And they reveal this over and over. If you torture people, you tend, usually, to break their mind entirely, and then the information you get is entirely worthless. Torture does nothing. So all that's happened to Gillis at this point,
just getting whatever
or to any of the
people
other
are
witches
wanting,
that are to be
the
tortured
narrative
to
they're
have a
wanting.
confession, is nothing more than that, a false confession. But she confessed, coerced and trembling, spilling forth all of this information that she did not do. Gillis admitted to being a witch, claimed that she had danced with the devil himself. Seaton, though, was not happy with that answer. He pressed harder. And Gillis, with Seaton's promptings, we might add, started to imply that others in the area were part of this coven of witches. She mentioned someone by the name of Agnes Sampson, a midwife from Haddington, and John Fian, who was a schoolmaster from another village.
Which is also a way to probably justify his treatment of her. Of like, if anyone was to be like, oh, that was bad to do, that was cruel and inhumane, and him being like, well, look, I was able to uncover all of these schemes and witches of the devil, that I'm actually a righteous person. Like, reframing all of this evil behavior to be masked as righteous. This is, a narrative that still happens today. And also she, like, I'm guessing, like, whether she, like, rejected him, it seems like that's probably what was happening. If, like, she didn't want to be with him, that's why he was, like, so obsessed and, like, angry with her and evil towards her. If, like, maybe she liked someone else. And even if that wasn't the case, like, there isn't any sort of justification for what he did, but, like, the rejection of men, of this being a very deadly thing often for people for women, for queer people in general, anything that is pushing against these patriarchal structures of dominance that are also part of colonization and colonial norms, that, like, this is the result of just completely blown out of proportion the responses.
Web of others across East Lothian. Her words, wrung from agony, set off a chain reaction that would blaze through Scotland like wildfire, pulling King James himself into the fray and marking North Berwick as the epicenter of a growing storm of witches. Okay, so now in the 1590s, King James is getting involved. In fact, he's very much involved in almost every witch trial that he can get his hands on. During one chilling session in Holyrood, within the Privy Chamber, Agnes Sampson, the person whose name was given out before by Gillis, was facing the king herself. Worn down by torture, her tongue still scarred from the witch's bridle, she whispered the words that stopped James cold. You see, James had not let up on the fact that he felt that someone had tried to assassinate him and his queen, Anne. And here, under torture, James alleges that Agnes leaned in and recounted a private exchange that he had with Anne on their wedding night, back in 1589 in Denmark. It was a tender moment James felt had been whispered away from prying ears. Now, this story, we have no idea what to make of it. James says this. You have two choices. Either James is lying, and he's using the story to further push his justification of torture and execution, or somehow someone told Agnes what to say. I guess the third option could be she is a witch and she has preternatural knowledge of this story. I'm just not going with that one. But for James, when Agnes said this, no one else could have known it. And for James, that was no trick. It was the proof that he needed of the diabolical power within Scotland. Convinced of her guilt, he had her declared a witch on the spot, and her fate was sealed. She was strangled and then burned on Castle Hill, January 28th, 1591. And then her ashes were thrown over the edge of the cliff of Edinburgh Castle. And Agnes wasn't the only one. John Fian, the schoolmaster we mentioned earlier, and he was hauled into prison. And there he faced the boots, another torture device. This time where iron wedges were driven between wooden planks to crush the legs into a pulp. And under this torment, on the day after Christmas no less, he confessed to leading the witches in a pact with Satan, orchestrating the North Berwick Coven's rituals. And he testified their intent was to drown James in the storms using a spell conjured from the devil's playbook. From there, the witch trials just exploded, and exact numbers are a blur in the fog of history. But the outcome was clear. Many, many dozens were burned to death on Castle Hill, strangled by the hangman's rope, then burned at the stake, and the pyres lighting up Edinburgh's night sky throughout 1591. The North Berwick witch trials didn't quench James VI's obsession with the supernatural. They actually stoked it into a roaring blaze. By 1597, 7 years after the fires of Castle Hill had died down, James channeled his fears into one lasting legacy. In 1597, James wrote his book, Demonology. But it's not what you think. It's less Dungeons and Dragons and more James justifying and explaining the witch trials in Scotland. And again, I remind you, no other monarch in the history of the West dared write such a book. Many of them didn't write books anyway, but what they did, they would write it on politics or the faith or something. But this was written by not only a king, but a very well-educated one. And so the book, Demonology, is cast as a Socratic dialogue between two fictional characters. Philomathus, a curious skeptic or a lover of learning, as his name says, and Epistomon, a fervent believer. Now, this is hardly new in theology or philosophy or anything else. It's not even that new in royal propaganda. But to make this about demons and witches, that is altogether new. You see, James, now 31, steeped in his Protestantism, argued that witches were no myth. They forged pacts with the devil, committed high treason against God, that's the important point that he argued, which is a crime that is a capital crime, deserving death. And he anchored his book in Exodus 22:18, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Now, anyone who's read the Bible has read that verse. They know what it means. What James is doing here, though, is giving a particular cast or a particular style to what a witch is. The book is about 80 pages, and it unfolds into 3 little short parts. The first probes magic and necromancy, tracing their dark arts to ancient grimoires located in abandoned castles all throughout Europe. The second unpacks witchcraft and sorcery itself and gives detailed instructions on how the pacts are sealed with Satan's mark and other types of lurid stories. And then the third and final part of the book explores the nomenclature and the existence of spirits and specters, from ghostly apparitions to full-on demonic possessions. What's interesting about the book is James doesn't shy away from the lurid. Witches, he claimed, were able to raise storms and sink ships. They could...
So, I mean, we can still see this Christian colonizer propaganda often, and that's what I call it, in like horror films, especially ones that are made in the US, where there is this like very Christian-centered idea of what it means to be up against the powers of hell, and how like possessions and stuff, that a lot of this can be traced back to his book that he wrote, and that it is a continuation of what he was writing to justify the colonization and ethnic cleansing of these lands that he was trying to conquer. So it can't be separated from indigenous identity, not only in this instance, but in other areas of the world as well, that these imperialist forces were trying to colonize and have colonized, that people are quite literally demonized in order to justify their utter dehumanization.
Shift, turn into wolves under the moonlight. And they even aided the devil in his, let's just call it, seductions of women. And they even reanimated corpses in order to enact their own carnal desires there. You see, demonology is not a scholar's book. It's a royal rallying cry aimed squarely at silencing doubters. And there were doubters. Famously, Reginald Scott, 1584, wrote The Discovery of Witches, which was printed in London.
Religious
and this book
fiction.
Dismissed witchcraft as trickery
Propaganda.
and other things designed to distort the mind. In other words, it was more like a magic trick than an orgy of witches and blood. James, though, was incensed, and he actually ordered that Scott's book be burned in 1597. On those same streets in Edinburgh, on High Street, where those previous witches had burned, now burned the book that raised questions about witchcraft in the first place. So demonology bears James' intellectual and paranoia at the same time in equal measures. It's not a very good book either in the end. Trust me, I've spent a lot of time on James. He actually is very, very good when he's dealing with politics. When he's dealing with witches, He's crazy. I'll just say it. He's lost his mind.
Or
And he leans
maybe
heavily into the
those are more
tortured
related.
confessions of Agnes Sampson and John Fian, not hard evidence. He's essentially recounting made-up stories drawn out only under torture. In other words, demonology is inciting a fear that doesn't actually exist.
So relating this also to the political fear-mongering of like how these are related, like it can't be separated, and also connecting this to world events now. We have an ad starting in 10 seconds. How this creating of a fear of the other, of the fear being the end goal for manipulation and control, rather than actually addressing a particular issue that is actually harming society. It's like the end goal being the fear of him saying like, oh, it's based off of a fear of something that doesn't exist, of like it's not an accident why everyone is coming out and being like, oh no, all of this communism, oh no, what's going on? And there being another Red Scare that's happening with this resurgence in McCarthyism to try to make it so people are fearful of actually talking about what they believe, of actually talking about distributing wealth, of actually having human dignity for people, that this is the kind of bullshit that capitalists, that the ruling class, that the 1%, that fascists, colonizers, they're all the same thing, that they get up to when they feel like their power is being challenged, when they're wanting to have all of their political agendas be followed, that they have to create this other in order to maintain control over people's minds, instead of people paying attention to the bullshit that they're getting up to.
Did inspire, though, one major idea. It literally is the source of how we, today, view witches ever since. See, this is the ironic twist. James, by trying to describe witches, actually created out of full cloth the very concept of what you and I consider to be a witch in the first place. You see, when James came to the throne of England, now James I, in 1603, his book crossed the Tweed and inspired William Shakespeare. I've already mentioned it. With the toil and trouble, cauldron bubbling kind of concept. 1606, it's staged in London's Globe Theatre.
Also, these portrayals are deeply transphobic, rooted in a lot of anti-Semitism, but also rooted in just this genocidal pursuit of ethnically cleansing indigenous people as well, like showing like bearded faces and stuff of like, oh, thank you, that's me, hi. Like anything that is existing, anyone who is existing outside of these gender norms, what they are viewing as norms, this binary that is based off of colonization, that it is viewed as threatening to the establishment.
And the play has Scottish witches right front and center, brewing potions and giving stormy omens. And this was a theatrical tribute to the king's wrath against the witches. And yet, ever since, the very idea of a witch itself, though it has evolved a little with new little wrinkles and flying brooms and things added after the fact, all of it is really intact here in the 1600s. You see, those images in James' mind as he lay awake at night at Scotland, those fantasy witches, are in part what you and I consider to be witches ever since.
Which this was also carried over, like it's not an accident this was happening here, and then also the Salem witch trials that they were happening in the US, of this being a continuation of upholding these systems of non-consensual dominance, of patriarchy, of questioning people who are in charge, of like if there are people who are starting to rebel against the system, that they are then viewed as a witch, and they're quite literally demonized and saying like, well, you need to be hunted and burnt at the stake. It's so ironic, though, this term witch hunt was often used to, or not often, it was used especially during like the Me Too movement, or just like men who are having are actually being called out for their behavior that is deeply abusive and harmful to people, that they're like, this is a witch hunt. That's like, do you even know what a witch hunt is historically? Do you understand that, like, this is completely, like, I mean, people who are in these positions don't understand history to begin with. And they also have a vested interest in rewriting history. But it's like, that is such a, like, stupid thing to say. To be like, this is a witch hunt. It's like, well, first of all, you're a dude, which, to be clear, there were men who were also called witches, also people outside of the gender binary as well. But, to be like, oh, you're demonizing me. It's like, no, this was often happening to people who weren't in power. You are in power, okay? But it's just a co-opting of language to justify whatever bullshit they got up to.
North Berwick trials were just the beginning. Between the 1590s and the mid-18th century, an estimated 4,000 to 6,000 people, and mostly women from the lowlands, were tried for witchcraft in Scotland. This is not some fear of superstition, obviously. There is a lot going on here. But that rate in Scotland is far, far higher than almost any other country in Europe at the time. England, for example, this is a hard way to say it, only, quote unquote, only executed about 1,000 witches over those same centuries. So you see, Scotland is outpacing people by a factor of 4 or 6 times. What's interesting is by the end of his life, as he grew older, James himself grew more skeptical, especially after becoming King of England, where witch hunts were less common. Still, though, it was not until 1736 when the Witchcraft Act was finally repealed. But Scotland's witch hunts, and James's book on demonology, left a scar and set the precedent for centuries.
Okay. Books and links in the description. Hi, bug. Hi. Juniper saying hi. Alright. I did want to watch this. Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft. The ancient origins of the goddess. Maybe we'll do that on Thursday? Maybe we'll do it tomorrow. We'll see what I decide. Anyway, shall we get into Macbeth? We are on scene 3 of Act 1. We just started it yesterday, at least, like, the official start of the play. Hi, Bug. Are you on quality control? She's making sure we're behaving ourselves. I'll get a blanket for her. Here you go. I know. Call her Inspector Tiny. Because she is always making sure things are up to par. How bug? She's making little biscuits on this blanket on my lap. Okay. Let's get into scene 3. I'm going to try to remember the voices I do. This is constantly my issue. Doing the voices that no one asks for, but this is the theater kid doing a reading. All right, so we are opening with the witches. This is the stage direction. Thunder. Enter the three witches. First witch. Where hast thou been, sister? Second witch. Killing swine. So, talking about like sacrifices to the devil, but also pigs often being a symbol of the devil. This comes from the Bible, King James Bible, of Christ putting the spirit of devils into pigs. Third witch. Sister, where thou? First witch. A sailor's wife had chestnuts in her lap, and munched, and munched, and munched. Give me, quoth I. Also, that seems pretty queer. We have a queer reading. She's like, munching in your lap? Give that to me. Aroint thee, witch, the rump-fed runyon cries. So she said, begone thee, witch. Footnote. The fat-rumped, mangy slut. I mean, same. Jesus. Her husband's to Aleppo gone, master o' the tiger. But in a sieve I'll thither sail, and like a rat without a tail, I'll do. So again, anything that might be viewed as queer or queer adjacent being quite literally demonized. Also, Aleppo is a place in Syria, I believe. Second witch. I'll give thee wind. So again, talking about witches controlling the elements. First witch. Thou art kind. Third witch. And I another. First witch. I myself have all the other. Oh, we don't need to read that footnote. And the very ports they blow, all the quarters that they know. I' the shipman's card I'll drain him dry as hay. Sleep shall neither night nor day hang upon his penthouse lid. He shall live, a man forbid. Weary Senites, meaning weeks, 9 times 9. Shall he dwindle, peak, and pine? Though his bark cannot be lost, yet it shall be tempest-tossed. Look what I have. So it also is switching the emphasis. So normally Shakespeare writes in iambic pentameter. And what's the opposite of pentameter? I'm going to look this up. This is an inverse. A very clever way of showing. I need to type with these gloves. What is the opposite of an iamb? Oh, is it a trochee? No, it's didactic. Oh wait, it's a trochee. Okay. So normally, and like the way we speak now is often in iambs of like da 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 da. That's an iamb, like where you are placing the stress on a word. And the way that the witches are speaking are like da 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 da. And so that's supposed to create like a sense of unease and difference. To highlight the difference between they speak and the nobles, because in Shakespeare, primarily it is the nobles that speak in iambic pentameter. Second witch. Show me, show me. Wait, no. What voice did I do? Oh no! Show me, show me. First witch. Here I have a pilot's thumb, wrecked as homeward he did come. Drum within. Third witch. A drum! A drum! Macbeth doth come. All dancing in a ring. Oh, so also like dancing, that's now witchcraft. Guilty then. All, so they're saying this together. The weird sisters hand in hand. So weird, once again, meaning fate, because they are supposed to represent, like, the fates in Greek mythology. Posters of the sea and land thus do go about, thrice to thine, and thrice to mine, and thrice again to make up 9. Peace, the charms wound up. So also they're saying thrice again to, like, mimic, like, them being 3, but also supposedly to have an inverse of the Trinity, while they're also speaking in inverse of iambic pentameter. Or just they're speaking in trochees. Enter Macbeth and Banquo. So foul and fair a day I have not seen, says Macbeth. Banquo. How far is it called to Forres? What are these, so withered and so wild in their attire? They that look not like the inhabitants o' the earth, and yet are on it. Live you, or are you aught that man may question? You seem to understand me by each at once her choppy finger laying, meaning chapped. That's rude. Upon her skinny lips. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to intercept. I mean, same. That you are so. Macbeth. Speak if you can. What are you? First Witch. All hail Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. Second Witch. All hail Macbeth. Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor. Third Witch. All hail Macbeth. That shalt be king hereafter. Banquo. Good sir, why do you start and seem to fear things that do sound so fair? Because he is not the Thane of any of these things, any of these places, yet. In the name of truth, are ye fantastical, or that indeed which outwardly ye show? My noble partner you greet with present grace and great prediction of noble having and of royal hope, that he seems rapt withal. Footnote, he seems entranced by these predictions, so he's like, why do you look scared when this sounds like good news? To me you speak not. If you can look into the seeds of time, and say which grain will grow and which will not, speak then to me, who neither beg nor fear your favors nor your hate. First Witch. Hail! Second Witch. Hail! Third Witch. Hail! First Witch. Lesser than Macbeth and greater. Second Witch. Not so happy, yet much happier. Third Witch. Thou shalt get kings, though thou be none, so all hail Macbeth and Banquo. First Witch. Banquo and Macbeth, all hail. Macbeth. Stay you imperfect speakers? Tell me more. Saying incomplete speakers. By Sinel's death I know I am Thane of Glamis. Oh wait, so he is Thane of Glamis. Whoops. But he isn't Thane of Cawdor. Or, and he isn't king. I misspoke there. But how of Cawdor? The Thane of Cawdor lives, a prosperous gentleman, and to be king stands not within the prospect of belief, no more than to be Cawdor. Say from whence you owe this strange intelligence, or why upon this blasted heath you stop our way with such prophetic greeting. Speak, I charge you. The witches vanish. Banquo. The earth hath bubbles as the water has, and these are them. Whither are they vanished? Macbeth. Into the air, and what seemed corporal melted as breath into the wind. Would they had stayed. So they also are calling out the elements, control over the elements, but evoking like earth, air, water. Bubbles also implies like fire bubbling up. Banquo. Were such things here as we do speak about, or have we eaten on the insane root that takes the reason of prisoner? So thinking that they're like losing their sanity. Of the root causing insanity, possibly hemlock. Macbeth. Your children shall be kings. Banquo. You shall be king. Macbeth. And Thane of Cawdor too. Went it not so? Banquo. To the self-same tune and words. Who's here? Enter Ross and Angus. Ross. The king hath happily received, Macbeth, the news of thy success, and when he reads thy personal venture in the rebels' sight, his wonders and his praises do contend, which should be thine or his. Silenced with that. Footnote. Duncan does not know whether to speak of his astonishment or his admiration, and so is silent of what Macbeth accomplished in the latest battle that he was in. In viewing o'er the rest of this selfsame day, he finds thee in the stout Norwegian ranks, nothing afeard of what thyself didst make, strange images of death. As thick as hail came post with post, meaning messenger with messenger, and every one did bear thy praises in his kingdom's great defence, and poured them down before him. Angus to Macbeth.
We are sent to give thee from our royal master's thanks, only to herald thee in his sight, not pay thee.
Ross. And for an earnest of a greater honour, he bade me from him call thee Thane of Cawdor, which is in which addition, hail most worthy Thane, for it is thine. So he is, so he was just bestowed the title of being Thane of Cawdor now. We do have an ad break happening in about 20 seconds. Banquo. What? Can the devil speak true? So he's like, wow, that prediction came true. Macbeth. The Thane of Cawdor lives. Why do you dress me in borrowed robes? Angus.
Who was the Thane lives yet, but under heavy judgment bears that life which he deserves to lose. Whether he was combined with those of Norway, or did line the rebel with hidden help and vantage, or that with both he laboured in his country's wrack, I know not.
So, footnote, he worked to bring about his country's ruin, so he is viewed as a, he's viewed as a traitor, the previous Thane of Cawdor. So he still is alive, but he is being stripped of his title. And it is yet to be determined what his fate will be.
But treason's capital, confessed and proved, have overthrown him.
Macbeth aside, so he's saying this to the audience. That's what an aside is.
Glamis and Thane of Cawdor,
the greatest is behind, meaning the greatest is yet to come. To Ross and Angus,
thanks for your pains.
To Banquo,
do you not hope your children shall be kings, when those that gave the Thane of Cawdor to me promised no less to them?
Banquo,
that trusted home,
meaning completely,
might yet enkindle you unto the crown, besides the Thane of Cawdor, but 'tis strange, and oftentimes to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths, win us with honest trifles to betrays in deepest consequence.
So he's like, this is fundamental to the play. He is essentially saying, like, I am not going to put too much stock in what they are saying. I'm happy with things as they are, because, like, giving too much into what they are saying, these witches and their predictions, that doesn't seem to bode well.
To Ross and Angus, cousins, a word, I pray you.
Macbeth aside.
Two truths are told, as happy prologues to the swelling act of the imperial theme.
Footnote, to the developing action or climactic dramatic action. And also climactic swelling act, this also has like a sexual connotation as well, of it being like him being like intellectually and possibly otherwise like turned on by the idea of being king and having this appeal to power. Or power being appealing, I should say. To Ross and Angus,
I thank you, gentlemen.
Aside, this supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. If ill, why hath it given me earnest of success, commencing in a truth? I am Thane of Cawdor. If good, why do I yield to that suggestion, whose horrid image doth unfix my hair, and make my seated heart knock at my ribs, against the use of nature? So that's a famous phrase, against the use of nature, meaning like something that's unnatural.
Present fears are less horrible imaginings, My thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical, shakes so my single state of man, that function is smothered in surmise, and nothing is but what is not. Footnote, in which murder is so far only a fantasy, so yet he is thinking like, so what's going to happen to the king then? This is the first mention of murder being a possible option for him to become king. Another footnote. My undivided self. Macbeth feels that his wholeness is coming apart under the pressure of his criminal thought. So he's like, uh-oh, he's committing thought crimes. And the worst crime of all, which is regicide. Oh, I just realized I smudged my makeup. Whoops. Oh well. I've never been one to espouse what is called like the clean person aesthetic, commonly called like clean girl aesthetic. This is not happening here. It never has. So continuing that. Banquo to Ross and Angus. Look how our partner's wrapped. Macbeth aside, so he's like in his head. His thoughts are like the first form of like agitation in being like, so this, even if the witches hadn't said what they said, that this was buried underneath all along of them like revealing his inclinations to himself. Macbeth aside, if chance will have me king, why, chance may crown me without my stir, saying without my effort, because he became the Thane of Cawdor without effort as well. Banquo to Ross and Angus, new honors come upon him, like our strange garments cleave not to their mold, but with the aid of use, so like new honors are, he's like essentially breaking in these new honors, like new clothes. Macbeth aside, come what come may, time and the hour runs through the roughest day. So that's a very famous phrase. Footnote, what must happen will happen one way or another. Come what come may. And also, like when we're coming to the end of a scene, especially when people are speaking in couplets, this is heralding, like marking the end of a scene, or when people are about to leave, but also when someone is like coming to some profound conclusion. Banquo, worthy Macbeth, we stay upon your leisure. Macbeth, give me your favor, my dull brain was wrought. So, like, pardon me, I was agitated. With things forgotten. To Ross and Angus, kind gentlemen, your pains are registered where every day I turn the leaf to read them. Let us toward the king. So this also is symbolic for him saying, like, let us go towards the king. He's also talking about wanting to be the king, so he has made this decision in his mind, and this is going towards his future. Aside to Banquo, think upon what hath chanced, and at more time, the interim having weighed it, let us speak our free hearts each to each other. Nope. Let us speak our free hearts each to other. Unconcealed thoughts. Banquo, very gladly. Macbeth, till then, enough. To Ross and Angus, come, friends. Exeunt. Okay. That's the end of scene 3. Still getting accustomed to the pacing and such. We'll see if I remember all these voices. Often in these readings, I like recycle a lot of the same voices. I need to get more creative. I often try to like picture people like how I imagine them in my mind and then be like, okay, so how are they going to be speaking? So if you ever are like having an opinion or an insertion of like, I think this character should sound like this, I am open to suggestions as well. All right. Oh, I did want to give a shout out
to someone who was giving some really great recommendations for Culture Corner and what we were going over for the voice of Bachaprat. Anto on YouTube. Thank you. You're greatly appreciated. Okay, that's going to be it for me tonight. But tomorrow we will continue reading Macbeth. We will be talking about Hecate. We'll also be reading The Bluest Eye. And we will be going to the chapter. So we're on page 73. Going to the end of the chapter, so 80, and this is before the chapter. See the cat, it goes meow meow. Come and play with Jane. The kitten will not play. There we go. That's what that looks like. Anyway, thank you all for being here. It was lovely being with you. Yeah, take care. Hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, and I will see you soon. Okay, bye.